and more. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the very first of our Magic Makers, I don't want to call it podcast, video series, chats, relaxed chats. And our first guest is Alessa of Soul Merge Healing. So I decided to do this little series. I don't know how long it's going to go on for, how much time I have. But I decided to do this little series because I was meeting so many interesting people through my work that I was like, oh my gosh, it would be amazing to share this with other people. Um, to discover different healing modalities and different tools to help us on our journeys. And although you can kind of share these people over social media and whatnot, it's not the same as having a conversation with someone and hearing all about their work and how they came into the sort of spiritual space that they're in and the experiences that they've had and the experiences that I've had also discovering the work as well. So that's why I decided to put this together, and we'll see how it goes over time and see who's willing to have a chat with me. Without further ado, this is Alessa, and we met each other through our artwork collaboration and branding collaboration as well. So Alessa, do you want to have a little introduction about what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jen. And I'm very happy to be your guinea pig on the first on the first one. So my name's Alessa, and I'm a breathwork healer, as well as an energy healer and using intuition and various other things to help us out. And the breathwork I've been trained in is breathwork as taught by David Elliott, who's a amazing healer based out of California. And it's a two-part inhale and a one-part exhale. So it's not an intense kind of breath, but it's a kind of breath that is able to, it really opens you up, really clears any stuck energy. And also, I find really helps you access your spirit, your higher self, and connect to spirit in ways that is incredibly beneficial.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
And
Jen, you think,
yeah, I mean I hadn't done any breath work. I'd heard about breath work from other people. Locally, the Wim Hof method, which a lot of people use for cold water swimming, and also obviously Kundalini, I'd heard a lot about. And I can't remember whether it did. No, I joined Kyle Gray's membership for a short while, not that long ago, and explored a bit of the Kundalini, and really didn't get on with it. It was too intense for me. I think my body felt like I was in sort of fight or flight mode, and so it was really interesting to have that contrast because uh, Alessa very kindly shared um, David's website in the process of us working together. So I downloaded his 45-minute track, which was about releasing fear, I think. And or actually, it's called I Am Safe, I should say. And it was so powerful for me. Like I couldn't believe how powerful it was. And it stuck with me. I remember it shifted a load of anxiety that I was having at the time. And I was very aware through the rest of that week. It really stayed with me, the energy of it, the calming energy of it, that I was aware especially during the next day, of how much I hold my breath and hold tension and allow stuff to stress me out in my sort of solar plexus area. So that was really, I always take note of when things make me feel physically or mentally, you know, if you're in these bodies long enough, you're aware of what makes you feel good and what makes you feel bad.
and they're trying to tell you things, right? They're trying to tell you things. They're an antenna for you. So they're trying to let you know where stuff needs to be moved or where they need a bit of help.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you discover David's work, and was it through your own healing journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely a part of my healing journey, which probably started around, oh my gosh, probably about 14 or 15 years ago in like full seriousness. But I only discovered David's work back in 2020. And the way I discovered the breath work, I had this feeling that breath work would really help me and was something that I needed. And I actually went on a breathwork retreat. There was a different kind of breathwork. I won't mention the name. But I did not get along with it at all. Like it was, I was just like, what the heck? What have I just signed up for? It really wasn't working out for me. And then fast forward a few months later, and it was May 2020, and we all know what the world was going through at that particular time. And I'd remembered that someone had talked about a breathwork healer called David in California. And that was literally all I remembered. So I was Googling David Breathwork California. And sure enough, thank you, Google, it came up. And not dissimilar from your experience, before I had a one-to-one with him, I actually tried one of the meditations, either one of the Spotify ones or one off the website. And I remember to this day, I was lying on my bed and I kept having to put my hands down because I swore that I was about 12 inches off the bed. Like it felt my body was vibrating like at a crazy speed and it felt like I was levitating. So I thought, well, if this is what a recording can do,
Yeah.
imagine what if I actually connected to the healer, how that would play out. So I did, and work with David to this day and have done multiple of his trainings. And definitely for the first couple of years, it was predominantly for my own healing, completely for that. It wasn't with a view to offering it to other people. But then gradually, as you go through your own journey, and as David and Spirit gives you a few nudges, and because I saw the power of what it could achieve and how it can help people, then I decided it was something that I could share with other people.
So in our sort of, I can't remember what year it was that we connected. It was definitely after 2020.
Yeah,
Were you still fairly early into that, into offering that? Yeah.
yeah, pretty
Um,
early.
yeah. So we connected through the artwork that I do, and you shared about the deer spirit that you work with. Do you want to elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, of course. So I think at that point, it wasn't clear to me maybe which my animal guides were. It's become a bit clearer. And I was planning a trip to Sedona, Sedona in the States, full of vortexes, a very interesting, energetic place. And they actually have also, there's a very cool store there that has a lot of, they do a lot of trading with all the indigenous peoples across the Americas. And so they have a lot of animal products there. And for use in ceremonies and other things like medicine. And I said to David, I was like, well, what should what animal should I go for? He was like, well, maybe try deer. And sure enough, so I researched deer. The spiritual meaning for deer is gentleness, and it's about the gentleness of love and how that can happen, and how that can move mountains basically. And also for me, then looking at deer in its natural habitat, you think about deer as in they just leap over any obstacles in their way. Like I'm planting my garden here in New Mexico. I have to get deer fencing for the vegetables. Otherwise, they're going to be in those raised beds eating all my greens. So I bought a deer skin, which felt very odd for me at the time, to be perfectly honest. But I picked up a small white deer skin and then I was like, oh my God, what do I do with this? And I I started meditating with it. And now it's almost like if you ever watched Peanuts, it's like Linus and his security blanket. It's it comes with me everywhere and is I meditate with it, I breathe with it. I now have other parts of the herd as well, and all the different skins perform different functions for me in my work. Um, and deer comes through a lot in terms of messages and visions, and because I remember when we worked on the channeled artwork, I said it can be fawn, it can be deer, it can be stag, because that's how it presents in all its different forms. And some of the most powerful visions I had was like being with a white stag and it turns into starlight and we're up through the universe together. And in a more pragmatic way, it was always standing next to a stag and the message being like, just hold my fur. Like if you're feeling whatever, scared or whatever it might be, then just hold on. And I have that sensation. I'm just like, you gripping, you can't see my hand, but I'm gripping on. And that comes through now. Like that's my grounding. That's how I kind of um yeah, connect with the spirit, is to feel it and all that kind of, and feel it like in that way.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So, um, just to share with people the different ways that the breathwork works is obviously, you can use the tracks that David Elliott has. I've popped a link of Spotify in there that you can check them out. And I used that a few times and had that really profound experience. And then you very kindly offered me a one-to-one session. And I was very fascinated as to how this was going to go, because I just was like, how, you're not here, you were wherever you were at the time. I think you were traveling all
Yeah,
over at the
say
time.
again. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And as someone who's just always very curious and open about spiritual journeying, I was just like, I wonder how this is going to be, exactly like you were with your teacher. And it was remarkable to me, because what I didn't realize you were going to do was to craft this beautiful playlist intuitively, I believe. And what Alessa didn't know was that music for me is massive in my life. You can see 3 instruments there. That's my dad's guitar on the wall. And so listening to music, I do when I'm working. I do it when I'm channeling. It's a huge part of my life. And Alessa picked out several tracks. I can almost remember the whole playlist that were so incredibly poignant for points in my life that I couldn't believe it. But of course, obviously, I was in this sort of meditative breathwork state, so I couldn't really stop and be like, "Oh, I can't believe you're playing this song." Um, but I do remember the energy of my father came through, and he passed away in 2011. And Alessa actually had picked out the song that we played at his funeral. So it was an incredibly emotional experience for me. But also, I really felt and saw a powerful message through that connection with Alessa there as a sort of guide and holding the space. Um, and as she's mentioned, it can feel really powerful. Certainly in, I think, the last breathwork session you did with the group, my hands were so, felt like they were surrounded in like cotton wool energy or something. It was the strangest thing, the electricity coming through. And certainly that I had similar, I think it was something to do with my hands when we did that one-to-one. So how did you kind of, was that the music and the deer, was that something that you crafted as part of your process?
Just to say on the hands, because the hands are like direct connection with the heart. So sometimes during breath work, people's hands can kind of like cramp almost, and it's because it's the energy flowing from the heart. And yeah, the sensations in the hands are because of what you're feeling in the heart. And as the energy opens and the heart opens, you get all kinds of sensations. And not every experience is blissful either, right? I mean, I'm going to put it that sometimes there's a lot of emotion comes up, a lot of anger, a lot of crying, but it's and in a good way, because the emotion is coming up to be released and let go. On the music is actually one of the parts I really have a lot of fun with, because yes, I do a playlist for every session, whether it's an individual or a group, and it's very much an intuition exercise. So because I always remember your first session, because usually I'm like, okay, Spirit, what songs? And I'll be like on Spotify and it'll guide me, or usually I'll hear like the key song to play, and the key song will come through in like I'll hear it, the melody or the lyrics. Most of the time I know what it is. Sometimes I don't, and I have to Google it and try and find it on Spotify and hope that intuition leads me there. Um, and it's a great uh confirmation that this is not me doing the work. This
Mm.
is you and spirit doing the work. My job is to hold space, and I see my job as doing as much work as possible on myself so that I can be as clear a channel, a conduit as possible, for spirit to come through and work with you. When it's you that's doing the breathing, I'm not doing it. This is one of the reasons I love the breath work, is that there's no, you can do it without me. I help because I'm holding space, but actually it's you that does the work. So on Jen's session, it was I heard like a snatch of a Coldplay song, and I'm like, I've never played Coldplay in a breathwork healing session before. I'm like, no. I kept hearing it, and I actually am a fan of Coldplay, but I had to Google it because I wasn't sure which one it was. Um, and even then, and I was sorry, it was a good lesson in not to doubt intuition, because I had it on my long list. I was like, okay, I'll put it at the bottom and we'll see if it comes up. And sure enough, in the middle of the session, it was like, you play that Coldplay song and you play it now. Okay, I'm playing it. And yeah, so the music is the fun part. And even not the last group you were at, but I think it was the group before. I had, I like the playlist had come together beautifully. It was really, it was feeling very, I suppose the word I come up with is sparkly, because that's how I realize it's like intuition and not my ego putting it together. It had a life of its own. And just as we hit the relaxation phase, so for people who haven't done the breath yet, there's an active phase when you're doing the active breath, and then you hit the restoration phase. And just before we were coming into that, I had two blasts of music in either side of my ears. Neither of them were on my playlist. So I was like, oh, okay. And I had to play them, and I had to, and they were played. And actually they were the songs, when I look through the gallery and I get the people whose cameras are on and I can see, there was such an outpouring of emotion. Like I can see it, and I can definitely feel it, but I could also see it on Zoom. And I was like, okay, wow, that was slightly on the fly from a playlist point of view, but
Yeah.
amazing how spirit just knew what to play and knows which songs to get in there.
It knows our triggers.
And actually, it's funny you say that, because it can also, like a few times, the song that's come in has been very strongly to be played on a one-to-one session. It has really irritated the person, like really irritated.
Right.
Um, and but that's the emotion that's coming up to be healed. That's what's coming up. Or they can use that irritation at the song, at me for playing it, to connect to something else that needs to be released. So it can work in many, many ways.
Yeah, I remember in one of the sessions you saying you might be annoyed at me, and I was like, oh, why would I be annoyed at Alessa?
Like 10
But I
minutes
think,
later, you're like, yes, I am.
how dare you play that song?
And again, it's the emotions or the patterns that are there. Sometimes they don't want to leave us. And so they can be irritated that they're being, asked to leave, or told to leave. Also, it can be resistance to the breath work. So the first 5 to 10 minutes of any breath work session are the hardest. And you just got to keep breathing, because the brain will be like, oh God, this isn't working. This is really bad. Oh, I forgot to go to the shop. Oh, I did this, I did that. Basically, any kind of resistance possible will come in and try and interfere. That's when the delivery will arrive, or your doorbell starts going, or the lawnmower next door starts going. It's all these kind of little ways to deflect you from healing, I
Yeah.
suppose. And it always made me laugh that you actually downloaded the I Am Safe meditation from David. I found that one incredibly difficult, incredibly hard, just because of what I was processing or going through when I first listened to it. And it was probably the only recording where I got up and I found myself in the kitchen. I'm like, what the heck? I've got to go back and lie down and start again, because I was so resistant to it. I was so resistant, and I couldn't actually. So there's a lot of David will use affirmations, and that one, obviously one of the affirmations is I am safe, and I could not say it.
Wow.
It would not come out. And there was a lot of, because I'm not safe. That was the internal
Right.
narrative. because I'm not. How dare you say I am? I am not. And I've worked closely with David. David's heard that intuitively from me for a long time. So and then now I can say now I love that one. Now I feel very comfortable doing it, and it's a great meditation to do. And it was great for me to do it because it was bringing up a huge amount for me.
You got to go through the process and yeah, acknowledge why it's annoying you and why, yeah, why other people might have issue with it as well.
Yeah, and it was actually even more than annoyance. It was just like complete like I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing that, which is a way my resistance can manifest very clearly.
Yeah, it is amazing. So when
Yeah.
you're watching, are you feeling stuff? Are you, I mean, you're seeing the video, but are you seeing Claire, with your Claire, whatever you call it, your
Which
third
one of the class?
eye?
All of the class.
Are you getting information in that regard?
Yes, I can definitely see. So from a physical point of view, I can see that if maybe but that honestly, the physical seeing is the least contributing factor to what I can or I will say or how I will manage a session. I will hear things that maybe are to be said to the person doing the breathing. And so that might be affirmations. It might be a nudge. I might see an image and be like, well, okay, what does this mean to you? Or not even that. I'll just say, okay, I'm seeing X. And I will have no idea what it means, but the person doing the breathing completely understands.
Yes. You
Again,
you
that's
did that. You did that for mine, and I just remembered that annoyed the heck out of me because because you brought up it was about my mom and my dad and what had happened. It was a very simple statement, but I was like, oh man, I can't believe this is coming up.
often it's things that we think
You've dealt
were
with.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the body is holding them or spirit is holding them. So the what I see physically is probably the least, but I hear things. I'm more claircognizant, so the knowing. I definitely have some clairaudience. And again, it's a great lesson in ego because just because I don't understand something, it's got nothing to do with me. So it's not about me. I don't need to understand what I'm hearing or seeing or knowing. It's nothing about me. It's about the breather.
Mm.
Um, so I just get out the way and let spirit, do what it needs to do through me and through you.
Was
But what I
there,
also,
oh,
oh,
sorry, go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
So the other thing, which I use more in person, obviously, but I do use on clients when we're online, and that's essential oils. So I do use essential oils. Um, it's just if you're online, you don't necessarily realize I'm using them, of course, because
If only we had smell-o-vision.
exactly right. You can't smell them, you can't feel me putting them on you. But because I do that with clients in person, then I do use them like online, even if it's just on me. And I'm like, okay, what oil am I called to? Or there's a reason for that. What needs to be moved. And because oils are incredibly oh my gosh, they're just magical in terms of how they can move things in the body and release things that again we might not even know or be conscious that we're holding.
Yeah.
But and it works the same way as music, is there might be an oil that you really get very irritated by, that you hate the smell. That's the oil you need to be working with
Mm.
9 times out
Patchouli
of
for
10.
me.
Oh, well, okay. That might just be because, we're not children of the 60s, but we smelt it just a bit too much. But
Yeah.
yeah, maybe there's something to work with a really good quality patchouli um, and see what it's moving for you.
Yes. And I have actually softened to it, I must admit, as of oil uses in a blend. I've
Oh, yeah.
realized its potentials and how much
Yeah.
it changes when it's blended. But yeah, I live in a very hippie populated area, so you can follow people down a street and you can know where they've gone because they're wearing so much patchouli.
That's amazing. Yeah. Old school fragrance. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, did you have these sort of spiritual sensitivities earlier in life, or was it something that kind of just hit you?
Um, Now I can see that, yes, I was very intuitive all the way throughout my childhood and adulthood. I just didn't perceive it as intuition. I just it was just me, which it still is, but I didn't realize. And when I think back to, like, even corporate jobs, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I was using my intuition daily, hourly. And what I do, because I find I do this now, and I realize I was doing it without being aware of it before, is that I sometimes have conversations with people, but what comes out of my mouth is answering what is in their head, not what they've said, if that makes sense. So because I wasn't aware I was listening to what they were thinking, but that's what I was answering as opposed to the words. So that always promoted a few weird conversations. But as a kid, I had a very strong imagination. I had, many imaginary friends, and I actually loved oils, loved essential oils when I was growing up, loved crystals. And so looking back, yes, it wasn't something I was really conscious of or uh, very active in seeking out. Those are the things that just appealed to me and just drew me in. Like being in a forest, I mean, sitting with a tree, I would do that happily for hours on end.
Yeah.
And now I realize that there's probably other kinds of communication going on, as well as a lot of nurturing, being in nature. But at the time, I thought I was just sitting by a tree.
Yeah. It's so subtle, isn't it? I think, and that's what can be so frustrating sometimes about the path that we're on is the subtleties, or I should say, what is normal for you,
Mm.
is not necessarily normal for other people. And that's certainly been the case for me as well throughout my life. But also dealing with that ego mind and always questioning, and you know,
Yeah.
trusting trusting what we're doing. And you really need those that feedback from clients to say, oh my God, like me, you played the most powerful song that you could play, or several, for you to know that it's working as well.
That's just fun. I have to say, that's just fun. If someone says that, I'm like, oh, that's so awesome. Because that's like another, yeah, that's things working out. That's spirit connecting. But one thing I have, and again, is working with the ego, is to have no expectations of the session. Because I remember, you know, uh, especially because the music has resonated with a lot of people. It doesn't resonate with everyone. So if I'm expecting someone to be like, oh yes, and I had the biggest release because you played X, I mean, that's not going to happen because that's my ego wanting that. And that's definitely not going to happen in that situation. So I have learned to have no expectations of feedback, or if people book another session or whatever that might be, because it's not, again, that's not, I will do the best I can possibly do, and that's my role. I'm
Mhm.
I'm done, and I'm out of there.
So you mentioned that you were in the corporate space before. Was it quite we've both left the corporate world, the quote unquote normal world. Um,
What if
was
this
it
were the normal
quite
world?
yeah, was it quite a transition for you? Was it very easy? Did you jump off a cliff? I felt like
Um,
I jumped off a cliff, so
did you, uh, did you know what you were gonna do? Were you like, yeah, I want to do this, boom?
all I knew was I had to do my artwork and stop doing design corporate work. But I
Yeah.
didn't, no way would I have any idea that I would be doing the work that I'm doing now. No way.
Wow. That's incredible. And I mean, that's the beauty of trust, right? You do trust because maybe you don't see the next bit in the path, maybe because there are multiple paths. So what you've decided at this point shoots you down one. Um, it was a weird, it was a quite a long transition for me, or a few false starts, let's put it that way. I had burnout, pretty serious burnout and depression back in around 2010, 2011, somewhere around there. And so that started definitely a phase. Uh, yeah, I entered a different stage of life for sure, because I was very conscious that it was my head that had led to that. I had friends who were, oh my gosh, that place you work for, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, 200 other people managed to work for that place and don't have what I had. So I think it's pretty much the way I'm wired. So to explore that, I started yoga, which was amazing for me. That was transformational. Very quickly after that, I started meditating, very quickly went into a silent meditation retreat, which was transformational. And very then so there was a series that was the start of it, but then I carried on until in a full-time job until like the end of 2017. And then after that, I was consulting and freelancing, and then transitioned completely from corporate into healing around 21. So
Mm.
it was a bit different. But that period of time from the burnout until about 2020, I would say, there was a lot going on. There was I started practicing yoga. I started serious meditation practice. I started studying Tibetan Buddhism. I worked with shaman in Peru. I started studying Andean cosmology. There was an ayahuasca experience or two. What else happened? I went to Egypt multiple times over quite a short period, and was very much drawn to certain places. I would have visions and then that told me to go to certain places. And if I didn't go, the visions would, really the universe would be like, come on, you're going. And had some amazing experiences in Japan and Indonesia, just none of which was anticipated. And sometimes I wouldn't even know why I was being drawn to certain places. But whether it was a past life contracts or whatever was happening, I definitely had quite a few messages, visions, and past life memories that came up in that period. So it
Wow.
was definitely it was a longish kind of journey. I wouldn't have anticipated what I'm doing today. But with the benefit of hindsight, I can see how things layered and contributed to get me to where I am today.
Amazing. Yeah, and following the path, the cookie come trail, and
It is that. But
yeah.
I also found that the universe had a way of, so I'd had a very particularly powerful vision that I had to visit certain places in a certain order. And I'd kind of put it to one side. And then I woke up, and I used to live in East London, and I had skylights looking out over East London. The first country I was meant to visit was Japan, and I'd never been to Japan. I woke up and I like look out my skylights, and I can see Mount Fuji out the window. And I'm like, well, that wasn't there when I went to sleep. And unless they've like picked up Mount Fuji and put it in Whitechapel, this is a message. And sure enough, I went to Japan, and I ended up going to Japan multiple times over a few years because it was clearly somewhere that had strong connections with my heart, with my soul, with a lot, either with past life or future, who knows. But it was a place that spiritually resonated very, very strongly with me.
Mm. Did you feel anything when you arrived in those places, or was it all sort of different?
Oh, that's interesting. Sorry, a certain experience came in, which means that it is one to share. I had one place that I really wanted to go to. It had come through very clearly in visions. It was on a vision board, and there's a pilgrimage route called the Kamano Kodo, which you walk. You don't have to walk it, but you walk it, and it's near the end, and it's this. You probably would know the image. There's an image of a temple and a waterfall in the background. Anyway, so I'd had an amazing experience doing this pilgrimage route, and got to that particular viewpoint, it's classic viewpoint, and I felt nothing. To be honest, I was like, what have I just, what, I mean, this was it. What I feel is literally nothing. I'm like, oh, well, I'll walk back down the hill. And I walked back down, and then I realized you could go closer to the waterfall. So I walked down. I was like, oh, I'll go closer to the waterfall. The bus wasn't due for a little while, so I was like, okay, I'll go to the waterfall. Went into the waterfall. Saw that there was like this little viewing platform that was a bit isolated from everywhere else, and I went up there, and I stood there for about 30 seconds, and then I just started sobbing, and I was like, oh, maybe I've been pretty active for the last 3 days, not a lot of sleep. Maybe it's that. It wasn't that. It was, I don't know where the tears were coming from. I don't know where it was coming from. I could not stop. And yeah, I was there for definitely at least 30 minutes, maybe closer to an hour. And the way the universe works, it just kept tourists away. And and I was just connecting with the trees, the waterfall, or whatever spirits I was there to connect with, and I was just sobbing. And because I have quite a logical Gemini mind, I then went back again, like the year later, just to test it to see if it would happen again, or whatever. Was I just overtired that day? And it was a it was a very profound emotional reaction. There were tears. It wasn't the sobbing, but it was much calmer, very profound, but just a much calmer experience. So clearly whatever had needed to happen had happened.
But the
And yeah,
emotion was still there.
yeah, but in not such a panicky, distraught. It was I was very distraught the first time.
Yeah.
Um, but it was much more relaxed and calm. And I'm getting goosebumps now. So yeah, little things like that.
I think that's amazing. I'm always fascinated by what the land holds in certain places. Because obviously I live in Wales, and there's a lot of stone circles here. There's a lot of ancient places, and it always just fascinates me um, whether these places have feelings. As you say, you go to a place and there's a lot, like you could go to Stonehenge, and people could be really like excited about it and whatnot, and you don't feel anything, and it's like, whatever. But I've had the same going back to my homeland, which is the north of England in Cumbria. And granted, I left that area in quite sort of traumatic circumstances, but every time I go back, I enter into what I consider to be the sort of gateway to Cumbria, which it is literally like that. It's a very um, amazing drive into that area, and I always have an emotional response that I'm a part of my brain's always going, "What is happening right now? Why am I so emotional?"
Right. And this is best for the brain, just accept that there's no explanation for it because you don't know what's happening. And I always find amazing, like going to places like the pyramids or Machu Picchu, for example, very high energy places, but they're so over touristed, over visited as well, right? But they keep that vibration, they keep that energy. But it's not, you might go, it depends on where you are on your journey as to how you resonate with it. So you might have this one experience one year and a completely different experience the next year.
Yeah,
Or you might be like in floods of tears and you're someone who's with you is like, yeah, it's okay, whatever. It
yeah,
just and it's all good. All of that is good, but it's right for you, it's what is right for you at that time.
yeah. And I think, part of my journey and certainly in doing this kind of series is that just being always curious and open-minded and just taking note and going, that happened. That was really interesting. Because it's very easy to forget these sorts of things as time goes by. And to just remember that, that happened, and I have no idea what that was about, and mark it down for later. Maybe we'll look
It
at
is
it
great
later.
to journal it and just remember it. And yeah, because otherwise you don't see the pattern in the moment. Excuse me. So but when you actually look back, you're like, oh, this led to this, or that was that. And all of a sudden you see things fall into place.
Mm-hmm. I think just to sort of tie into this part of the conversation, the last time I was up in Cumbria, it was actually this time last year, and we went to Castlereagh Stone Circle, which is, if you Google it, it's probably one of the most picturesque ancient stone circles you'll ever see, except maybe the one in Scotland is pretty impressive as well. And it's sort of surrounded by the mountains of the Lake District. So we went there because I'd never actually been, even though I literally grew up near there. It was driving distance. It's always the same when you live near a place, you don't visit all the touristy places. So we went, and sunny day like today, and it was lots of tourists there, and I was like, oh, that's a bit annoying. There are people clambering over the stones and doing yoga in the middle of the thing, and yet I was standing there and going, where I am or where I was a year ago, and my hair was the hair on my arms was standing on end. I could feel um the vibration of this place
Yeah.
like I'd never felt before. And I've been around other stone circles and not felt that. So, and other people had said to me, "Oh, it's such a powerful place," and I thought, oh, "I'll see." It'd be interesting in whether I pick up anything, but I could definitely physically feel it, despite
Yeah.
all of the distraction of people in the area. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's certainly something fascinating about that.
Yeah. But I think you're right. It's to keep that open mind and the curiosity, because just because, people make judgments like, oh, this is a very powerful energy place. It's like, maybe for you it is. That doesn't mean to say it is for everyone else. Fine, there are certain places that clearly are for multiple people because, that's just how it's worked out. But it's to have that open-mindedness and curiosity. And if it doesn't happen at first, then, sit and meditate and see what happens and be open to going back again and seeing. And maybe one of the most powerful experiences with nature I had was, and it wasn't a sacred site, it was a eucalyptus grove up in California. And I just looked at it. We were walking past, and I was like, I really want to go over there. We didn't go in that moment, but we went a little later, and it was just magical. And so whatever energies were there for me, and whatever I was there for at that point, it just connected at that time.
Mm, mm. And it's yeah, it's paying attention to that, isn't it? And
Mm.
being open to that whimsy, I suppose. You
That's a
know,
great word. Yeah, love
um,
that word.
and I do think that like part of what you're bringing is, um, if you are already a sensitive person, or even if you're not, or if you don't think you are, to go through your breath work journeys does make you go, what's happening in my body right now? Like I'm feeling stuff that I wouldn't normally feel lying here and just breathing. And I think that perhaps might tap people into certain levels of sensitivity that they didn't have access before. Um,
I think that's it exactly. I think the joy of the breath work is that it works. I'm going to use some terms that, yeah, okay. So it works on like a 3D level. It works on this physical plane because it works to move things that are stuck in your body. Whether that's anger or irritation or sadness, anxiety, it works on the physical plane to move these out. And if it just did that alone, that's amazing. It can remove trauma from the body. So that on its own is incredible. And that's enough for a lot of people, more than enough for lots of people. It also works on a 5D level. So people who have been working with their intuition or do want to work with their intuition, it connects you to spirit, which maybe is not of interest to everyone. But it's there for you if you have the propensity or willingness to go there. And it can connect you to multi-dimensional experiences that you wouldn't necessarily experience just sitting on your sofa.
totally. I totally agree. Um, yeah, I don't know whether you've had other sort of seasoned breathwork, uh, what are they, clients or people who come to you regularly that have had
Yeah.
like a journey where it has it expanded for them?
Yes, for sure. You see, there's journeys on the physical level, like working on you, anxiety can decrease, or certain conditions can decrease. So you definitely see the physical progression. And yes, there are people who maybe weren't even conscious of their intuition in the first session. Then all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, I'm connecting dots a bit more, or I'm, you know, seeing certain things, or all of a sudden are like, um, my ears are ringing, and that's a sign that clairaudience is about to kick in, or is starting to kind of move around. Um, so that definitely happens. And again, it's up to that person and how they react to it and how they interact with it and move forward with it as to then how it develops. Because you can shut it down. People are, and it's perfectly okay. People, if they just want to shut it down, that's perfectly okay. Other people were like, oh, I'm going to go deeper and deeper. And it's the same with the physical healing. Sometimes it can feel too much. But then maybe in 12 months, you'll feel a bit more ready to, delve a bit deeper and go into another layer. And that's again where my ego can take a back seat, because Um, it's not up to me how far a person goes on their healing journey. It's nothing to do with me.
Yeah, I love that. So the most recent group class that you did, because Alessa's now holding these group breathwork sessions on a Sunday, I think it is,
Every other Sunday. Yeah.
every other Sunday. And so I immediately said, yes, definitely doing that. And whenever the last one was, the week before last, we were having our session, and in the relaxation phase, which I absolutely love, I was lying on an electric blanket, which was a first for me, just because we're in this sort of in between temperature state. And I was relaxing and I started to hear this buzzing noise that I immediately thought was like an electric buzzing noise, you know, when an electric device starts to go on the fritz. So I kind of, and I'm always paranoid. I think that these things are just going to immediately burst into flame. So I sat up and I was like, oh, it must be the electric blanket, right? Unplug it. No, turn it off. Still going. Unplug it from the wall. Still going. I'm like, what is happening right now? Because I could hear it everywhere. And Alessa couldn't see me because I don't have my camera turned on. But so I lay back down. I was like, oh, well, whatever it is, it'll go away. And I thought, well, what if it's in my head? Is this forever now? Have I broken myself? And I just plugged my ears and unplugged them, and it faded. And I was like, okay, that's odd. And then I did it again and it went. And I just thought, what the heck was that? Because I'm used to ringing in my ears. I get that a lot, but it was a completely different frequency. And I shared it in the follow-up meeting, and you very kindly said it could be clairaudience coming back.
It could
So
be. And I think that everything is, I think everything is energy, everything is vibration. So it might have just been like a readjusting of frequencies.
yeah, and I think that was the one where my hands felt really like they were off off the covers and just surrounded in this electricity, So I mean, I did have clairaudient stuff as a child and it used to scare me. So I wouldn't be surprised if I've turned that off. Um I'm
Just
not
temporary.
open to that.
I had, we definitely a couple of years ago when I actually first started doing the breath work, my intuition was coming online very strongly and quite dramatically. And I was seeing things that I did not want to see. Um, and I had to work through that to a big extent, but there was also a kind of temporary, okay, you don't want to see it, we're turning it off kind of thing. I'm like, I want to see it, but I don't want it to all be scary. Is probably the best way to do it, because it was just at that point in my journey as well, it would be more yeah, it would trigger me on it would be fear. It would be
Yeah.
triggering me. And the best advice I got was, well, are you in those images? Is it happening to you? And it was, well, no. Whereas it's like, okay, then you're seeing for someone else, or you're seeing for the collective. It's not your experience. So that was a helpful kind of nudge, but it definitely, I think spirit took me seriously, and they definitely toned down for a bit, until I guess I was more equipped to deal with them.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point to share, just that, because we're here and talking about it, is that having that autonomy, I think perhaps sometimes you meet people who or we all have this where we're just delighted to have these seemingly magic powers, right? And then when it gets too much, you're just like, oh, but I don't want it. I want it, but I don't want it, and I think being very clear and frank with whatever's happening and being like, this is how you communicate, and we don't communicate like this.
Yeah.
Like in this house, for example, I have a rule that there's no strange noises, there's no knocking, there's no steps, or you don't show up in the middle of the night. Like that is not happening because it'll scare me. So
Yeah.
we only communicate, we only interact in this way. And I'm very, if I ever feel anything like that, then I'm gonna call in all of the archangels, and you don't want to deal with that.
No one wants to deal with Archangel Michael if he's mad. No one
Oh,
wants that.
no.
So that's amazing. That's such a good tip. I think that's really, yeah, I think that's amazing. And it's realizing that yes, like autonomy is a great word. We have free will. This is a dimension with free will. We can choose that. And it can be a lot if your clairs are coming on online. It can be a lot to deal with, and it can be a lot on in daily life to deal with. So there is a way of managing it and negotiating with spirit to be like, okay, I like sleeping, therefore I would want my messages during the day if possible. Things like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works out, sometimes less so. But we have free will. And I think the more work we can do on ourselves, then the more awareness we bring into our intuition as well. So what am I trying to say by that? Because there's lots of chat about needing to be protected or these energies, those energies. That's all valid. The best form of protection is your own awareness. And we were talking before we hit the record button about how to distinguish between what's yours, what's someone else's, and what's the collective's, because you only have to deal with what's yours. If you're feeling something that isn't yours, it's not yours to feel. You don't have to feel it. And it's maybe depending on, your job or whatever, it's quite useful to know about it. But it's not up to you to process someone else's stuff. So it can be let go. And the best, we were saying, I do regular check-ins. If I'm feeling a certain emotion, is that mine? Is that my anxiety? Oh no, it's someone else's, or it's over there, or whatever. So it's like, okay, well, it stays there then. It doesn't come in here. And it's sure, carrying black obsidian is probably going to help a bit as well. But it's just like, well, also my biggest tool is my awareness to deal with that.
Totally. Totally. Not being driven by it, but actually go. And I think this is where meditation practice and also breath work, that resting state of breath work, puts you in that state, which you can get to in meditation, where you are suddenly hyper aware, but also in the amazing state of peace. And you can go, oh, okay, so all that other stuff is not me.
Not you.
All those
No.
judgment, all that chatter, all that mental stuff, all that emotion, it's really truthfully not me. It's just an experience that's flowing through me. So it allows you to get used to that and go, right, when I start to get tightened out like a little coil in a winding a clock or something, when that all starts to get a bit tight, I can go, wait a minute, this isn't mine, or someone's gone and done something and I need to just release all of that now. It's such a powerful tool, and it certainly, I think the breath work has helped me with that.
I mean, that's always good to hear. And I think especially in these times, there is so much dragging our attention from the outside. Look at this over here, look at this horrible thing over here, look at that, look at that. And you don't want to be living your life from the outside in. You want to be living it from the inside out. And from that space of centeredness and connectedness, when you know your true self and you know your true nature, that's how to operate in this world and not being driven by whatever headline or YouTube clip or whatever you might have has attracted your attention. And those methods of distraction are just increasing on a daily basis. There's so many things be out there to distract us, that it's a troublesome time for that, for sure. And the more practices you can have that ground you, whether that is being in nature, meditation, breath work, yoga, I think creativity as well for that is that kind of grounding, and being in your true heart space, your true heart center, that then you're equipped to deal with whatever else is going on the outside.
Totally, totally. So I'm gonna invite everyone, if they have any questions, to pop them in the chat there. And whilst we're waiting to see if anyone's going to ask anything, um, would you like to share kind of what you've got going on? I know you've got a new sort of venture happening that we're discussing in a few weeks, or next week, is it? If you wanted to share about that, and also where people can find you, because you do have a breathwork session on Sunday.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, as marketing person. Um, So I do one-to-one sessions, I do couple sessions, and that doesn't have to be romantic couples. That can be mother-daughter, sibling, whatever relationship you're looking at. And those can be booked by my website, which is soulmergehealing.com. And the group sessions are every other Sunday. And those are also on the website. And I also do mention them quite frequently on Instagram, which again is Soul Merge Healing on the gram. And yeah, those breathwork groups are a great introduction to the work, I would say. And it's just a great kind of hygiene practice, I think, as you go through life. And it's a nice stable kind of schedule for that. The other thing that I'm working on, which isn't really ready yet, I have a property here in New Mexico, which is going to be a retreat center. And it's beautiful. It's up in the East Mountains in New Mexico. It is in the forest, so many trees, and a wonderful healing environment. And that's going to be particularly for releasing trauma energy, particularly sexual abuse energy. And people will be able to come to stay from 7 days to 3 months. So almost like a bit like a rehab kind of approach, but all holistic therapies from breathwork, somatics, yoga, meditation, and just that environment to let go of that trauma.
Amazing. It sounds
Yeah.
like a big project.
Yeah. The great thing is it will take a village to do it. So it's definitely not all on me. So but it's going to be a wonderful space. And I'm very excited to actually see people's journeys just on that land and with those trees, and with the work we can offer and the support we can offer in that place. Yeah, very
Wonderful.
excited.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth has asked, she said, thanks so much for this. Do you need to understand the science of the body to do breath work?
No, it's a very short
It's
answer.
an easy answer.
You don't have to understand the science of the body. I mean, it can sometimes help to understand where organs are, so that if you're feeling something somewhere, you're like, oh, where is that in my body? But honestly, the more the brain can get out of the way, the better. And sometimes if you do have like a very good knowledge, that can become thought, and so the brain is distracting you by, oh, it must be that's my liver, therefore I must be angry. And it's like, well, or just let the body tell you, or just let it move without analyzing. Um, is what I would say to that. I mean, the breath, there is science behind the breath. Your oxygen goes into the lungs, the bloodstream, the brain, and it stimulates the hypothalamus gland in the brain, and that releases endorphins, and that activates the other ductless glands and activates the chakras. And as a whole, oxygen alkalizes the body. So it's encouraging the brain to relax. And breathwork is a meditation, and it's an active meditation, but by breathing, you're distracting the brain. You're giving the brain something to do. So once the brain can, brain is great. It's there for a reason. It does a great job at what it does. But it over contributes a lot. So if the brain can relax, then the body can start to heal itself.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like yoga nidra in that way, where you're being guided to focus on individual body parts, and eventually your brain just goes, I'm just going to dissolve into the void, which is
Exactly.
wonderful.
Dissolving into the void is a great intention to have. A great
A,
outcome.
a question come to my mind actually, because I remember this going through my head when I was going through my first breathwork session, listening to the MP3, was that balance between, like, I just thought, am I just hyperventilating, or will I hyperventilate? And also, at the end rest point, because I suddenly had stopped this unusual breath pattern, and I'd filled my body with oxygen, there was a part of me that was like, again, I've just done the I am safe thing, and I still managed to come up with a fear. It was like, have I forgotten how to breathe properly? Do I need to sort of reinvent breathing? So, like, I don't know whether there's anything you can share about that. Is there a balance between hyperventilating? Is there anything to do with it, or is it totally different modality?
It's a different modality. It's a much slower breath. And it's not, there's an element of control. It's not, if you're a pranayama practitioner, it's not kumbhaka, you're not doing retention, you're not controlling in that way. And it should feel relatively easy. So it's a and that's lower belly, heart on the inhale, and then just a regular exhale. Now, everyone has a very different breathing technique. I am actually a pretty kind of restrained, well, not restrained because it's not conscious. I have a quite a quiet breath. Other people breathe very actively, and all is good. You actually find the rhythm that your body needs. There's not a risk of hyperventilation. With this modality rather than holotropic, the holotropic, it tends to go for peak experience. So it's all about peak experience. Whereas this type of breath work is all about the depth of experience you can have. That to me is the simplest way to explain it. And if you're starting to think, oh my God, I'm going to hyperventilate, that's your brain trying to get in your way. If if you start panicking about that, it's your brain trying to distract you from the breath happening.
Mm. Yeah, so it's such an interesting practice, and it is amazing to see what the brain, for me anyway, what the brain comes up with. I'm very used to it doing this. It's no surprise I have anxiety. So I'm always interested as to what it comes up with, as to what I'm going to die from next.
Yeah, that was interesting. Am I going to be able to breathe again? I'm like, well, yeah, until you die, and no, then you're not, but that's okay. But it's also what I found is that I would stop breathing. If a vision was coming in, I would almost hold my breath because I didn't want to disturb it. And actually, what I found out is if I breathe through it, the vision gets stronger.
Mm.
So I was always like, can't breathe because then the vision will disappear. And it's just like, no, keep breathing, and it will stay and get stronger and keep transforming. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, one of my most favorite artworks, personal artworks, was something that I saw in a breathwork vision. But I think I went, something's happening, and it stopped. But I
Yeah,
anyway.
which is amazing that you remembered as well. I remember that one's a beautiful, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think one of the, again, this is coming in, I was very conscious that I know a lot of people when they do the breath, they want to dig in, they want to release something specific, and that's great. And I was in one breathwork session and I'm just like, that seems like a lot. And the message I got was, yeah, I mean, that's one way you can do it. The other way to do it is to fill yourself up with love. And if you fill yourself up with so much love, it squeezes out anything else. So you don't actually have to go and dig for stuff. It will leave because it's being expelled out by just like this surge of love coming through. So, and that was a wonderful lesson for me. And it was a very lovely experience to be like just filling yourself up with love and joy and gratitude. And then there's no space for the crap. The
Yeah.
crap will leave because it doesn't like to be in that environment. So the more we can do that, again, that's a more gentler approach. Um, and really quite a lovely way to go about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think definitely the more you, as you say, the more you dig for something, the deeper that hole's going to get, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's an attachment to it. But again, it works great in some situations for some people. But there are other ways of going about it.
And it's lovely that you can bring in that, you know, that intuition that you've got, that communicating with your guides in the moment to get that information that's relevant for the people attending or the individual attending, which is really beautiful. So we have wrapped up, just gone over a bit of an hour. Thank you so much for everyone who came. I wonder whether there was reason why the rest didn't come. Maybe I did something wrong with Zoom. Who knows? But anyway, we'll put it up on YouTube probably by next week sometime. And everyone will be notified that was here on the call and that was also registered for the call. But yeah, do definitely check out Alessa. As she said, she's got a Sunday call this Sunday which is a really nice way to set up the week. Actually, I've certainly found that it's a lovely way to go into the week rather than the usual anxiety about a new week. It's a great setup. And yeah, thank you guys for attending. I really appreciate it.
And thank you, Jen, for hosting.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed it and enjoyed getting to know you, Alessa, a bit more and more to come as well, which is wonderful. So I'm going to just stop recording now.